No, you really got to push yourself and actually you have to ask and ask for help.
Tonight, breaking the cycle of sexually exploited Inuk women.
It needed to be exposed. It needed to be said.
Iqaluit's mayor speaks out on sexual harassment happening in the territory.
The emergency we're talking about right now was an emergency 10 years ago.
And MPs debate into the night on what Canada should be doing about climate change. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward.
And I'm Melissa Ridgen. The National Inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls is in St. John's, Newfoundland for the final week of hearings. Testimony was heard from an Inuk woman today who spent 10 years in Ottawa's sex trade.
Her emotional testimony detailed how she ended up there and what Indigenous women need to do to get out. Tom Fenario has the story.
I tried to kill that pain when I was a witness to that murder.
Melia Shutapik was a child when she witnessed a murder. The 42-year-old Inuk woman from Iqaluit testified that the trauma from this experience led her to run away to Ottawa. But the trauma followed her, so she turned to drugs. And to afford the drugs, she fell into the sex trade.
Money was so easy, I wanted more and never stopped from there for a while.
Janisha Wilson works with vulnerable Inuit women in Ottawa. She testifies that the colonial history of forced relocation and dog slaughter has led to poverty, which in turn encouraged treating Inuit women as property.
I find this particular image very telling, where you see trading women for supplies, showing how structural violence through colonial processes have normalized violence and the moving and using of women's bodies as property.
Wilson says Inuit women are targeted by predators in Ottawa to this day. She made over a dozen recommendations to prevent Inuit women from falling into sexual exploitation.
It's better to know that information before you get off a plane and where you can access information than when it's too late.
Wilson would also like to see more Inuit women in leadership roles for prevention programs, something Melia Shutapik has already taken on. In Ottawa, she manages a lunch program for Inuit. She says she does her best to pass along her experience to those in need, but that a lack of services often leads to relapses.
No, you really got to push yourself and actually you have to ask and ask for help. I mean, if you really want help or go into treatment, then there's a waiting time too. And while, people are waiting, you're just going to go back to that cycle. And
one thing she would like people to take away from her testimony is that the cycle can be broken. Shutapik just hopes that in the future, it'll be easier for Inuit women to do so.
It was not easy, though. And I was also embarrassed that I don't want my kids to know what I went through, because I don't want them to go through that. Now I have a grandson, so I'm glad I put a stop to all that nonsense.
Tom Fenario, APTN National News, St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador.
A senior bureaucrat in the Ministry of Public Safety testified at the Quebec Inquiry today. The inquiry is examining the relationship between some state-run agencies and Indigenous people in the province. It comes after a number of Indigenous women in Val-d'Or alleged that members of the province's police force sexually assaulted them. Quebec launched the inquiry after being lobbied by the Assembly of First Nations of Quebec and Labrador. Louis Morneau of the Public Safety Ministry, which oversees the provincial police, says there have been a number of improvements in his department since the inquiry started, including more money for Quebec's Indigenous police forces.
Our vision is to make sure that they have the means they need to have their own Indigenous police force and keep it. I come back on this, but the changes that were made this year with longer agreements, up to 10 years, with the funding that is guaranteed with the 2.75% increase annually, those are steps forward.
The mayor of Iqaluit, Madeleine Redfern, recently told a parliamentary committee that some male Inuit leaders use travel as an opportunity to sexually assault their staff. And now she's facing a backlash for her remarks.
When Iqaluit Mayor Madeleine Redfern told a parliamentary committee that some male Inuit leaders use work travel to sexually harass and assault their staff, she knew there would be critics. She just didn't realize how bad it could get.
I've been told basically to watch my back, you better never find yourself alone. I've had, people, pretend to point a gun at me and shoot.
It isn't just random attacks. Official Nunavut joined in to criticize Redfern's statement. The Premier got in the press, saying that Redfern's comments were, quote, a blanket statement, and adding, quote, it's bad to say that. Days later, he put out a statement saying he was recommitted to reviewing Nunavut's sexual harassment policies. Former Iqaluit Mayor Elisabeth Shutialpik is the minister responsible for the status of women for Nunavut. She told media that she thought it was, quote, unfortunate Redfern had singled out Inuit men.
When the minister came out and said, it happens worldwide and, I shouldn't have focused or, on Nunavut or on Inuit, the fact is that we need to also see the change happen here in our own society, here in our own territory.
And it does happen here, at a rate higher than the rest of the country. According to Stats Canada, women in Nunavut are at a 9 to 12 times risk of being sexually assaulted compared to the Canadian average. And you don't have to look far to see powerful men in Nunavut getting away with bad behavior. Our MP, Hunter Tutu, was kicked out of the Liberal cabinet for an inappropriate relationship with a much younger woman staff member. He's still the MP. More than once, Nunavut voters have re-elected an MLA following a resignation for a conviction of sexual assault. When Redfern testified, she was facing that history and context as one of the few people to come forward, and now women are coming to her.
I had one person contact me and say, this happened to me and I was raped out of my job and my self-sufficiency.
Yet despite the threats, despite the stats, despite the official backlash, Iqaluit's mayor would do it all over again.
I would have still spoken up. Because despite all the sort of like the negativity and threats, the number of messages that I've received and emails and people just talking to me because it's happened to them or they've known it's been happening and that it needed to be exposed, it needed to be said.
Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
The Revenant actor Dwayne Howard has apologized to a Vancouver woman for an incident that happened years ago. The woman he is apologizing to is identified as Laura Lee Paul. She wrote a Facebook post after she says she was triggered last week. She started writing after 2 days of what she says felt like anxiety. Paul told APTN News that she was 16 years old and Howard was 30 at the time of an incident. Howard doesn't elaborate on what the incident was that he is apologizing for, but he said he is ready to hold an accountability circle with Paul.
I'm here today to stand my truth and apologize to Laura Lee Paul and her family and her community. I want to firstly acknowledge the pain and hurt that I have caused to her. I sincerely and apologize for what you have went through carrying that trauma.
That video has since been taken down from Facebook. Howard shot to fame after starring as Elk Dog with Leonardo DiCaprio in The Revenant. APTN will have more on this story on aptnnews.ca.
Cannabis will be legalized in a matter of hours. Our Daryl Stranger looks at how one vendor in Manitoba is preparing for this historic day.
A number of vendors are set to open tomorrow with the legalization of marijuana. One of those companies is a Métis-run business called Seven Oaks, a division of the Believe Cannabis Corporation. The co-founders, Grant McLeod and Miles Fontaine, are Métis from Winnipeg, and they brought their company to a recent Cannabis and Hemp Expo here in Winnipeg. The expo was designed to bring awareness to cannabis and showcase some products and positive effects cannabis can have, as well as answer some questions consumers may have had. McLeod is a regular cannabis user who has a background in law and works closely with Indigenous issues, and he spoke about the process of getting Seven Oaks involved in the cannabis industry.
Originally tried to be a licensed producer, didn't make it in that realm. Then we pivoted, tried to apply for Manitoba retail. We didn't make it, pivoted again, and ended up focusing on building the brand and distribution. And fortunately, we were able to get supply agreements with Manitoba, BC, and Ontario. And so that means that our product, Seven Oaks, is going to be available in those provinces on day one.
Many people know cannabis will become legal, but many do not know the regulations on how it is to be licensed, shipped, and sold. McLeod walked through the requirements that are needed on a legal cannabis package.
The packaging has to be a matte finish, it can't be glossy, it can't be metallic. We have to have the mandatory Health Canada warning, THC signs, so this will be on every legal cannabis product. The logo can't be larger than the warning sign. We have 14 health warnings that are evenly rotated throughout all your packaging SKUs, as well as THC information, CBD information. This is the actual strain name, and then on the back, we're required to identify the producer, the lot number, and some other information like that.
Seven Oaks makes cannabis for people who live an active lifestyle and regularly consume cannabis. They hope that by legalizing marijuana, it will be able to break stereotypes and show that it can be helpful and not harmful in the right scenario. Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
We've got more details about the death of a patient we told you about yesterday who was being transported for medical care on a Greyhound bus.
We'll have that story after the break, but first, here's your weather forecast for tomorrow.
Starting on the east coast, 12 with showers in Halifax, 11 in rain for Fredericton and Charlottetown, +1 with snow for Nain and Happy Valley, Goose Bay, 9 with rain in Montreal, 7 with rain for Quebec City, sunny and 11 in Windsor, 9 under the sun in London. Snow and +3 in Thunder Bay, snow and 0 for Sioux Lookout, +1 and sunny in Puckatawagan, 4 above, under the sun for the Paw, +5 in Winnipeg, 10 in Brandon, 9 in Dauphin. 15 with rain in Regina, a high of 20 under the sun for Swift Current. 15 above for Meadow Lake, 12 for Buffalo Narrows. Welcome back. An update now on the story of Abraham Donkey. He's the man from Nissachawiasik Cree Nation who died on a Greyhound bus on his way to Winnipeg to see a doctor. Ashley Branson has more.
I'm standing outside the St. Boniface Hospital where Abraham Donkey was scheduled for a follow-up appointment with his heart specialist. On October 3rd, he boarded a medical service vehicle in Nissachawiasik Cree Nation's nursing station to transport him to Thompson. Donkey recently had stents put in his heart, and family members claim he asked the local nursing station for a flight or an escort for the 12-hour bus ride, but he was denied. He got on a Greyhound bus in Thompson over 750 kilometers north of Winnipeg. In the early mornings of October 4th, Donkey's niece, Ramona Nekaway, says passengers noticed Donkey's declining health near Fairford.
The bus driver tried to resuscitate him, and there was another young lady that was from Nelson House here, another patient who also tried to resuscitate him, but it was to no avail, I guess.
Ambulance rushed him to Eriksdale Hospital, where he was pronounced deceased. Donkey's niece, Ramona Nekaway, says this is an emotional time for the family, and the government needs to be accountable.
They need to do something. The system is broken. The system is putting people at risk. And so we need to make sure that this doesn't happen again to anybody. My family is in utter grief and shock and despair, and they're angry.
In a statement, a spokesperson for Indigenous Services Canada states the normal mode of travel is bus based on the most cost-effective mode of travel and taking the client's medical condition into consideration. And flights are approved on recommendations from the nurses or doctors based on the medical condition of the client. APTN spoke with the Nissachawiasik Cree Nation's nursing station, but they refused to comment.
I'm sorry, I am a federal agency. I do not provide any comments to the media. I'm sorry.
Family members of Donkey still want answers.
My uncle's life was very valuable, and he was a very humble and kind human being. We need to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
While the family grieves for Abraham Donkey, the spokesperson for Indigenous Service Canada says they're contributing $42 million over 3 years to support the health system in northern Manitoba, which includes local access to physicians and specialists. Ashley Branson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
An emergency debate last night on climate change dragged on in the House of Commons until midnight. It was over a United Nations report that says climate change will be irreversible unless carbon dioxide emissions are reduced by 45% in 12 years. Here's some highlights.
So the issue is not to debate tonight Canada's current carbon plan, Canada's current climate plan. This is not a status quo debate. And we shouldn't be scoring political points because one party did this and another party did that. We should be here as humanity.
That we have one party, the Conservative Party, that doesn't want any action. That they took no action for the last decade. The emergency we're talking about right now was an emergency 10 years ago. This was an emergency, and they never took it seriously. And now what do they want to do? They want to kill all climate action.
I think it's rich coming from this minister that here in Ottawa has a taxpayer-funded chauffeur that drives her to and from meetings. Back in her riding, she has a taxpayer-funded chauffeur that drives her back and forth to all of her meetings. She flies to and from. She doesn't walk. Mr. Speaker, and all she has done, Mr. Speaker, there's no real tangible plan that she's introduced except for a tax.
The government says that the environment and the economy go hand in hand. Well, if you look at the record of Conservatives, you'll see emissions reductions and you'll see economic growth.
I listened to the member opposite for his address, and what struck me is that he just doesn't get it. All I heard from him in solutions was references back to the failed attempts by the Harper government that accomplished no changes.
He didn't even listen to the speech. He says the member just doesn't get it, but he doesn't in any way acknowledge or respond to the arguments.
Or someone who consumes 100 grams of meat a day on average makes a bigger impact, makes a 2.5 times impact on climate change than someone who consumes a plant-based diet. We all need to change our consumption habits if we care about future generations.
Cattle that the party on the other side of the floor thinks we shouldn't eat. Actually, they need to do more of their science review because women actually do need some red meat.
We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we'll tell you about a food forest in Saskatchewan.
But first, a look at tonight's episode of Face to Face, airing right after the news. Our guests are 3 of the commissioners for the National Inquiry who expressed their many frustrations with the federal government, including their disappointment with the inquiry being timed to the next federal election.
I'm trying to think of polite words to use, but horribly disappointing not only to us but to Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people all across Canada. We view this issue or issues of violence against Indigenous women and girls to be so serious and so important to all Canadians that this national inquiry should have survived an election cycle.
Picking back up in northern Alberta, beautiful temperatures, a high of 20 in sun for Grand Prairie, 17 under the sun in Peace River, 22 for Lethbridge and Calgary, 21 in Medicine Hat, 17 in Tofino and Vancouver, 19 for Victoria, sunny and 13 for Smithers, 14 under the sun in Fort Nelson, 11 and rain-snow mix for Mayo, 10 in Dawson with sunny skies, 15 under the sun in Fort Liard and Trout Lake, 11 and sunny in Wrigley, minus 11 with snow in Sax Harbor, plus 8 in Colville Lake. Minus 7 and sunny for Arviette, minus 10 under the sun for Chesterfield and Repulse Bay, minus 12 in Iqaluit, minus 9 for Resolute. Welcome back. Having to travel south for school is difficult for many students across the north. But as Charlotte Mort Jacobs reports, one school in the Northwest Territories is challenging those barriers.
These kids can be trusted with knives. They know what they are doing. They are making bougon, dry meat.
To the bottom, see how it's still thick, you can see.
The classroom is the land for Deshinta Bush University. Parents earn university credits with UBC, U of A, and McGill by studying textbook work and practical skills at Deshinta. The bonus? They get to bring their kids for the entire semester.
I was rushing, and my arms were still tired from yesterday.
The kids are put to work, completing their regular schoolwork on top of land-based activities. What are you going to use that for, Dominic? Something Cheryl Mandeville, mother of Dominic, is happy about.
When I told his teacher what we were doing and that we would be away for the month, he's like, awesome. He could learn way more out there than, he can in here, so.
The kids are learning the same skills and completing the same tasks as the adults. They are gathering supplies to hang their dry meat.
I could trust him to make his own fire. He's very happy about that. He's like, Mom, I could make my own fire now. And he knows, we don't play with matches or lighters at home. It's something, it's a survival skill.
Deshinta has been around for almost 10 years. Kids U instructors like Justina Black are alumni of the program and understand the need for parents to be present.
For Indigenous people, we have children with us in our communities a lot, and I think that's really important in keeping a balance of the relationships that we maintain in community and having the different energies within the camp as well.
Black says her job is to help the children connect with the land and to themselves. And it's not just the kids who benefit.
As a Dene person, that is our way. We continue passing on the teachings, and it is a part of our lifestyle, so I think it's important that I continue passing on what I can with these kids.
A few days ago, the camp shot a moose. Mandeville said the kids stayed up to help without complaint.
And it's being part of all of the different little processes, so he's being involved is the most important thing, right?
The last task of the day is journaling, something to show the parents, but more importantly, to show the kids how much they've learned. Charlotte Mort Jacobs, APTN National News, Mackenzie Island, near Detta.
Lastly tonight, as the provinces get ready for the legalization of marijuana, Nova Scotia has revealed how much pot will cost there, with entry-level prices set at more than $6 a gram. Stores will sell it under 3 categories, with the most expensive starting at about $11 a gram. Officials say they looked at a number of factors, including the price of the illegal market, when they determined the price. Meanwhile, some industry insiders say the inventory available tomorrow will only be a fraction of what was ordered. Based on estimated sales projections, the corporation in charge says they have enough supply for 3 weeks.
Should be a pretty interesting day tomorrow.
Yeah, you have to wonder what those retail shops will be experiencing when they open their doors across Canada.
And you'll be discussing this issue tomorrow on In Focus?
Yes, tomorrow on In Focus we have the effects of legal weed. We'll have some guests talking about the economics of it, as well as some people who are in the retail market.
Going to be an interesting show. Tune in live at 2 p.m. tomorrow. And stick around. Face to Face is up next with the commissioners from the National Inquiry. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a good night.
I'm Melissa Ridge. See you tomorrow.